Welcome to day 4 of our spin along here at Schacht Spindle Company, celebrating 2020 Spinning and Weaving Week. We're going to talk a little bit about prep. I'm going to show you the difference between top and roving, and we're going to talk a little bit about the differences between woolen and worsted spinning and where they're most applicable. Let's start spinning. The two major kinds of preparation that you find commercially are roving and top. And the difference between the two is that roving is carded and top is combed. It will make a difference in your spinning, but to kind of give you an idea, if you haven't prepped your own fiber before, roving is much like if you were to brush your hair, and it gets the fibers organized but not completely aligned. Then if you were to take a comb and put the comb through your hair, it would align those fibers up much more neatly. The reason that this matters is that the twist will enter your yarn much faster when all of the fibers are aligned. I thought that these fibers were really good for you to be able to see the difference in the alignment because they are both similar in structure. They're both about the same staple length and they are almost the same fineness of fiber. So this is a really good representation for you to see that the drafting of something that's carded is sometimes a little bit easier than the drafting with the top. So it's important to remember too, when the fibers are so aligned, that your hands have to be a little bit further apart. The one thing that you definitely don't want is to be trying to draft while holding both ends of that staple length. And you want your hands to be gentle and relaxed where the fiber can just slide along its neighbors. So if you're new to spinning, try to look for things commercially if you're not preparing your own fiber that say roving and not top. But I do want to talk about how to handle top because we have our Rocky Mountain Meadow braid, which is this year's colorway for our Spinning and Weaving Week and this spin along. And we're going to talk about how to deal with this. Maybe if you're a beginning spinner or you haven't been at the wheel in a long time, and you're finding that the twist is entering just a little bit faster than you would like. This Rocky Mountain Meadow braid has many great changes in colors. The thing to recognize about color is that you get to choose how long you want your color changes to be. If you just spin off the tip, and you'll have these big swaths of these different colors. Now, if you're a little bit new to spinning, or like I said, coming back to your wheel after being gone for a while, you might want to strip this top down and fluff it up a bit. So I'm going to go to where I see the next color change happening. I'm going to open up that fiber. Hold my hands nice and far apart. Give it a little pull. So I've now separated out one length of the color. When you start to unfold braids or top, even in roving, a lot of times there's a natural separation. And you can see this one opening up right there. And I'm just going to follow that down and get that nice and open. When fiber is prepared, commercial fiber especially, and it's dyed and then it's packaged and it travels across the country, it tends to get just a little compacted. So you usually do need to fluff out your fiber before you spin it. So I'm also seeing there's a natural separation here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to section that off. A lot of people get really upset about people who strip braids because you paid to have all of these fibers aligned. Well, you can really keep a lot of that alignment if, as you're separating the fibers, you really go right down to that V and make sure that the fibers aren't splintering off in a funny direction and giving you a lot of frizz. So now I have a piece and it has another separation. So I'm just going to go ahead and separate that again. Now, one tip that someone gave me, and it works really, really well with silk, is if you hold the fiber and you kind of pop it open. And what we're doing right now is we're just, introducing some of that air so that as we're drafting, it's going to be just lovely and delicious. So you'll notice a difference. Tomorrow we're going to talk about drafting. And you'll notice a difference in the fiber and how it spins. The part that I have fluffed out versus the one that I have not. Now, tomorrow we're going to talk a little bit about drafting, and the preparation lends itself well to different kinds of drafting. For instance, since we fluffed this out, worsted is probably going to take away all of the work that we just did. A worsted yarn, you're taking out all of the air, and it's a much flatter, smoother, silkier yarn. And we just fluffed this out. And so if we were to spin it woolen, that would be a better choice for this sort of preparation. One of the other things that I'd like to talk about is that sometimes you get a braid and maybe you fell in love with it at a fiber festival and it sat on the shelf for years and you don't, it hasn't really inspired you. Well, I'm going to show you how to use hand cards right now to do a little bit of preparation where you can change some of the colors of the roving that you've purchased previously. I'd like to talk a little bit about hand cards, and I'm looking at this section of the roving, and I'm thinking, I'm not sure that this is my favorite color. So this happens to me a lot with oranges in different braids. So I'm going to section out the pink. I'm going to save that for later. And then I'm just going to go down to where the blue looks like it's starting to shift into the purple. And so what I'm doing right now by separating these out is that I'm going to try to just tone this color down by doing a little bit of blending. So to do that, I'm holding my hand card. This happens to be a Schacht mini card, 72 PSIs. And I'm going to charge the card. Charging the card just means that we're putting the fiber on the card. And I'm going to layer them so that they blend together a little bit more quickly. Now, there are many different ways to card. I card by switching my hand cards. That was the way that I was taught. So if you're new to spinning, there are many different ways to do it. And so looking it up and having a teacher show you their most efficient way. Mine might not be the most efficient way, but it definitely works for me. So you can see as I'm blending, I'm going to be getting just a little bit of a more subtle color. And I'm shifting what looked a little bit yellow to look more green because the yellow and the blue tends to make a little bit more of a green. So we can just fold that over and roll it up off the card. And we have a new roll log to spin. And tomorrow we're going to talk a little bit about how we're going to spin these different preparations with different drafting techniques. Okay, so I have the wheel set up to spin just a little bit heavier than my default. And right now I'm spinning on the top, and I'm spinning with a short forward draw. This yarn is going to be a smooth yarn, and you can see that it has a lot of luster. If I want to spin a yarn for durability, I am going to spin something that has this sheen and luster, something where I've taken out a lot of the air, and that kind of yarn is good for a sweater, or, a 3-ply would be great for a pair of socks. Now, if you're looking for something that's going to be warm as well as beautiful, you would want to spin with your roll log. Your roll log is going to give you a little bit more because the fibers are not aligned in that way of combing. They're aligned by the carding that we just did. So I'm going to get my wheel going. And you can just see the difference in the drafting. So even though I'm spinning relatively the same yarn, it's got a lot more disorganization and a lot more air in it. So when we pull it back, you're going to notice it's just a little bit more fuzzy around the edges, and it definitely is much more lofty. This is the kind of yarn that you would want to spin by this preparation to have something that was going to be warm and snuggly. And the other thing that's great about when you use a preparation like carding is that it's a much lighter weight garment or blanket or piece that you're doing, so that you can take that into account. If you had these two same yarns and we had the exact same yardage, the purple yarn on your right would be a heavier yarn, just by the fact that it doesn't have the air in it that the green yarn does. When we're taking a look at the diameter of our yarn, the prep does play into that a bit. So if I want a skinnier, thinner yarn, it is a little bit easier to get that if you split the roving down so it's in a smaller amount. Sometimes when you're spinning off the tip, even though it can give you these beautiful long color changes, you will end up pulling out more fiber from one side of it than the other. And you have to be careful to make sure that you continually are flipping it so that you aren't running all the way down this colorway and you still have this part of the fiber left over. So if you want to spin a little bit finer yarn than what you were spinning, or maybe what is your default, we can go back to the 2 previous days. So the things that we remember are that a skinnier yarn takes more twist, a fatter yarn takes less twist. And the 2 ways that we're going to do that is we are going to move this drive band down to the smaller part of the whirl, and I'm going to decrease the tension because we want that we want this yarn to have time for the flyer to move around and let the twist build up before it draws on. So those are the two adjustments that I'm going to make the yarn a little bit skinnier. And I have stripped this down pretty far just so that I'm working with a smaller quantity, and it's going to be just a little bit easier for my hands. So I do not like to change speeds. One of the reasons that I believe I have a default yarn is that my feet just naturally move very slowly at treadling, and my hands tend to move at about the same pace. And these are two things that I think it's really hard to get out of our rhythms. So that's why I think it's really important that you know how to change the wheel to make the yarn that you want, so that you don't have to change those things. So remember, a finer yarn takes more twist. That means we want less tension to give the flyer time to build up the twist. And we want to have a higher ratio of times that our drive wheel is going around in relationship to our flyer, which is also going to give us more twist. More twist, finer yarn, less twist, fatter yarn. See you tomorrow.